This video is a tribute to B.M.Barua, shortly known as B.M.Barua, a Pali language scholar. Today, if we know a little bit of Aseevagam, all credit goes to Mr. B.M.Barua. Mr. Barua was born on 31st December 1888 in Chittagong, West Bengal, India. He earned an MA degree in Pali language from the University of Calcutta. Barua later joined the Mahamuni Pali Institution as headmaster and went on to London on a scholarship and obtained D.Litt and MA in Greek and European philosophy. Barua's famous books are A History of Pre-Buddhistic Indian Philosophy and the Ajivikas. It was the book, the Ajivikas, influenced A.L. Basham to do research on the Ajivikas, and A.L. Basham obtained his PhD degree and wrote a book called The History and Doctrines of the Ajivikas. Barua discusses in detail the philosophy of the Ajivika leaders in his books. Now let us see what Mr. B.M. Barua talks about Aseevagam founders like Purana Kayappan, Pakkudukai Nankaniyar and Markali, as well as Nari Veru Vutalayar, otherwise known as Ajita Kesa Kambali. Now let us see what Mr. Barua has to talk about Purana Kasappa. He gets his name wrong. He talks about Kasappa, but we know that he is Purana Kayappan. Ka-appan means Karupan, and Puranar means one who with complete wisdom. According to Barua, Puranar drowned himself near Saraswati. And he seems to be the contemporary of Ajatasattu of Magadha as well as the contemporary of Milinda, the Greek emperor. And interesting information about Purana Kayappan is he says that formerly Purana Kayappa was a slave, that he completed the number of 100 slaves of a family. And Purana Kayappan is attributed to the philosophy of non-action. So he discarded the theory of action. According to Kayappan, when we act or cause others to act, it is not the soul that acts or causes others to act. In other words, Kayappan says the soul is passive. The soul being passive, whether we do good or bad, the result thereof does not affect the soul in the least. According to Kayappan, the soul is beyond good and evil. The philosopher Sri Lanka identifies Kayappan's doctrine with that of the Sankya's view. Next, let us see what Barua talks about Pakkudukai Nankaniyar. Here also he gets his name wrong. He talks about Katayayana, who is nothing but Pakkudukai Nankaniyar. According to Pakkudukai Nankaniyar, the root of all things are two classes. One is the changeable and the unchangeable. Pakkudukai Nankaniyar talks about the elements earth, water, fire and air, and also he talks about pleasure and pain and the life atom, which in Tamil called Uyir or the soul. He says that love atoms or the pleasure is some force which combines, and hatred is something which separates, and that is what causes pain. And he talks about the act of killing means the act of separating from one another the elements of being in their organic unity and nothing else. Next, let us see the leader of the Aseevagam sect, Markali Gosala. Barua talks about Gosala in detail. He says Gosala or Markali must have been a biologist and a naturalist. He says that Markali had a tender regard for animals and all forms of life. Markali was a strict vegetarian and he did not use any intoxicants. And he taught people to how to live rightly. So, because of his strong moral attitude and how he taught the right way of living, Barua says even many Buddhists and Jains followed Markali. And he also discusses that he knows nothing about the early years of Merkali. And he says Mahavira and Merkali met at Nalanda, and he says Mahavira learnt a great deal uh, about various philosophy and various knowledge from Merkali. Barua says Merkali spent his whole life in biological researches. Not only that, he was also interested in physics and ethics. Merkali talks about purification through transmigration, the doctrine of transformation, passing of soul from one state to another is of Merkeli's idea, and the law of change is the universal fact, says Merkeli. And he says all living things must attain perfection in course of time. Merkeli's core philosophy is that all living beings are without force and power of their own. All living beings are bent this way and that way by their fate. That which is to be must be, and that which is not to be cannot be, is the philosophy of Merkeli. And he says everything in this world is fixed. What is fixed? The period of existence in this world is fixed for every human being. The properties of things are fixed. The functions of the senses are fixed. The nature of our actions and our fortune are also fixed according to Merkeli. Merkeli says every being lives, acts, enjoys, learns, and dies in the manner in which it is destined to do so. We can call it this is as destiny or fate or necessity, nature, providence, or reason. He says nature as a self evolving activity. Merkeli denies both action and its result. He talks about 8 kinds of action, 5 are sensuous, and the rest are mental, vocal, and bodily. He also talks about reanimation or natural transformation. He talks about the 6 constant and opposed phenomena. Those are gain and loss, pleasure and pain, life and death. According to Merkeli, everything is predetermined. Merkeli was a minimalist and he strived for the best and the highest and encouraged people to be also in the same way. Next, he talks about Ajivikas Kambali. In Tamil, he is known as Nariveru Talayar. He says he is the founder of Indian materialism. He also compares the philosophy of Epicurean to that of Ajivikas Kambali. And Barua has got an opinion that he must have been more of a Stoic than an Epicurean. Ajivikas Kambali advocated, marry and take life as it is, enjoy the food and drinks. That is the way of life of the materialistic philosophy. He was against sacrifice. He was against offering food to the dead, and he always says there are no perfect saint. And he believes rather in life than in death. The intelligible essence, he says, or emerges from the 5 elements and vanishes into them at death. In essence, the philosophy of Ajivikas Kambali is that of disintegration. He says that the fire returns to the fire, the earth to the earth, the water to the earth, and so on and so forth. Thus, we see that B.M.Barua's work is a very important work on Ajivikas, which was used by the later researchers like A.L. Basham and Professor K. Nedunjarian. And he was the forerunner for the research on Ajivikas because he had studied the Pali language and translated all the Pali text into the English language. And this video is a tribute for B.M. Barua.